Nothing like starting a video with a quick fire 5-question quiz. In a few ticks, I'll be reading out a headline and a brief précis. 2 headlines that came from New Zealand newspapers. What you need to do is guess which decade the article appeared, 1900 till today. You've got 12 seconds to think that over. Into which decade a title I'm about to highlight was penned. Easy peasy. Let's get into it. The first question of 5. Increased road tax will kill off electric motor vehicles. Increased road tax will kill off electric motor vehicles. (1922), that's right, the Roaring Twenties. A century ago, when proponents of electrically driven motor vehicles were concerned new mileage taxation tariffs were being applied disproportionately. How did you go? I will give you a clue to kickstart you on number 2. This headline was a bit more modern. Which decade did this appear in a New Zealand newspaper? Private transport should be curtailed in New Zealand's inner cities because of vehicle pollution. Private transport should be curtailed in New Zealand's inner cities because of vehicle pollution. (1970), bang on. Half a century ago, the New Zealand Clean Air Society were proposing this environmental initiative. Having fun? We're up to number 3 in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Article is headed, Farming Future is the Electric Tractor. Farming Future is the Electric Tractor. Bet you were miles off there. Let's see if you can now right the boat and come back with vengeance on number 4. Adoption of electric vehicles as private cars is highly dependent on electrical vehicle charging stations. Adoption of electrical vehicles as private cars is highly dependent on electric vehicle charging stations. Fair call, somewhat of a trick question. It was the same year as electric vehicle owners were moaning about the road costs. I am now feeling sorry for you. I'll let you get away with 2 decades either way on the last one, so you can at least get a run on the board. The headline reads, Electrics not yet practical. Electrics clearly being EVs. Electrics not yet practical. In 1967, if you had said the 50s, 60s or 70s around then, I'll send you home with a gold star to show Mum. That last headline cutting came after Ford UK had come out with a prototype battery electric vehicle, the Commuter, the review of which was fairly scathing, seen as inferior to the Mini and one of Ford's own staples, the Anglia. Evaluated as impractical due to its size and lack of range, the Commuter was seen as little more than a gimmick. I would suggest, deadly at speeds over 30 km per hour, you wouldn't bother to take the body out, as it could double as a coffin. It comes to a bit of a shock for most people when they see photos like this one. Battery-powered electric vehicles lined up outside the Carlton Corner in the middle of Christchurch a century ago. The spruikers of electric vehicles taunted Kiwis for not getting with the plan. 1928. Electric battery buses. A fleet of EV trucks. Innovatively, 100 years ago, battery trains. Trams in Gisborne. Even a few odd luxury hybrid electrics. Yes, really. The Owen Magnetic in 1917-18. And then there's the belief that electric cars are a triumph of modernity. Revolutionary. They aren't. Ditto hydrogen. On your screen is the first hydrogen vehicle. The Hippon-mobile, invented by Belgium in 1866. Even by 1970, when that headline, "Fill your car up for free," was in the Christchurch Press, solar was old hat. The Baker Electric was invented 50 years prior, 1912. Next thing, I'll be suggesting a nuclear-powered car. It had gone through the manufacturer's heads. The Russians claim to have created one in 1955, per the NZ papers. Ford created the Nucleon concept vehicle 2 years later. You're looking at it. 10,000 miles on one matchbox of official material. Any men listening, if you haven't had children yet, wearing lead undies is recommended. Nor has there been any great leap forward with the internal combustion engine. My 50-year-old Mitsubishi runs faultlessly. Sure, there have been some tweaks, greater efficiency. Overall, just like EVs, despite billions in engine developments and alternatives, nothing earth-shaking. So what happened to the push towards electric vehicles over 100 years ago, when climate change was called the weather? Why aren't there electric vehicle vintage car clubs in New Zealand today? This country, after all, has a car ownership only second to the USA. What went wrong way back then? A time when even a household name like Edison couldn't get market traction in the car market. There are a number of reasons, two of them key. What I'm about to regale will sound strikingly and strangely familiar. For those that think that EVs are the way forward, it's prudent for you guys to look backwards to a similar time when they were also seen as a viable alternative to the internal combustion engine, then unceremoniously crashed and burned at 2,500 degrees Celsius, and taking 5 fire engines to put the fire out whilst evacuating the entire neighbourhood. Let's now travel back, address the two main reasons why EVs failed in the past, see what has and what hasn't changed, look at other inhibitors as well, and starting with two random vehicles in the market in 1917-18, cause one. On Team Electric, the stylish, handsome cab-looking Detroit Electric. Team Ice Baby Ice, the 4-cylinder Overland. Why did I pick these two? They were advertised on the same page in the same paper. Clearly, they are garnishing different clientele. The Overland's market being the family sedan, the battery car was more upmarket, considerably so. In an age where political correctness wasn't a thing, could see you tried for sedation. The Detroit's key market was as plain as the nose on your face. Chicks, not just any chicks, rich ones. The cost for this vehicle in 1917, 900 quid. To put this astronomical price in context, the annual income for a butcher or teacher at the time was 300. A doctor, £600 per annum. But don't worry, the Detroit also came with a spare battery. Only, it was an optional extra, just a mere £300 extra. And the Overland, it was still a price that would require saving a few pennies, but within the range of far more Kiwis. The Overland could also go a mite faster than its competitor, 75 miles per hour full tit versus 25 miles an hour for the electric. The speed limits were rather academic though, given there wasn't one in New Zealand at the time. This first speed limit, 30 miles per hour, wouldn't come into force till 1930, just 30 miles per hour. So, to be fair, your Detroit electric was fine to and from the garage and trips into town. The first major reason why electric cars disappeared from the roads then, they were, and still are in some respects, too expensive for the average family, mum, dad and 2 kids. Further, a second reason, whilst on the subject of pennies and pounds, scrimping to get transport for the family, to my mind, a far larger adverse reason in the extinction process. Resale. Per the classifieds in the papers, a 10-year-old Overland would go for around £225, a depreciation of, let's say, around 150 quid. A decade on, how much would you get for your Detroit electric shopping basket, pray tell? Zero. Scrap price. I appreciate the depreciation on modern EVs are in no way that savage. It's still fairly dramatic. 2017 Tesla Model X, new, 135,000 for sale 7 years later, 90,000 kilometres later, 70k. This vehicle depreciated 10,000 per year. Yikes. In the around town market, a 12-year-old Nissan Leaf G with 60k on the dial, 7k. What will 7k get you? 7 grand get you? Wise. Toyota Corolla, 1987 KE70, picked randomly on Trade Me, been around the odometer 2.7 times. I couldn't track down the original price new, around 22,000, throwing a dart at a board. Imagine you owned this vehicle from original and got 47 years of motoring out of her, forgetting the upkeep, putting aside the on-roads. The KE70 has depreciated $15,000 over 47 years. That's just $300 a year, or $6 a week. Remarkable retention. Owning that Tesla from new would have cost you close to $200 a week in depreciation alone. That's a lot of financial leeway here to pay for the odd tank of fuel, oil and grease. Before we even ask, awkwardly looking into the future, what are the odds that 2017 Tesla Model X is a functional vehicle like the Toyota when it turns 47? Before I get to my 2-word conclusion, I know many of you are thinking, he's forgotten range. Well, no, I know you'll be surprised by this. I was traumatised almost. It wasn't that much of a determining factor 100 years ago. Whilst the speed was slow but adequate to start with for our Detroit electric, powered by its nickel-iron battery, the first DTs to enter the market in 1907 had a range compatible with that first generation Nissan Leaf, a respectable 130 kilometres per charge. 20 years later, the Anderson Electric Car Company had improved that range to a whopping 300 kilometres, give or take. That's right, people. That's the same range as the Tesla from before. The more observant of you may have noticed what was on the side of the old Edison bus photo I put up earlier. It would travel the 380 kilometres between Christchurch and Dunedin on a single charge. It was somewhat disturbing to learn so little has changed in this respect. Similar cold weather performance. In winter the range of the Detroit electric would drop by 25%. Today that stat is much the same. In well over a century, no one has come up for a solution to combat the decrease in battery performance when temperatures drop. It is impossible to look back at electric vehicles on our roads, equate them to any sort of golden era of motoring. They flopped because head-to-head they were no match for the internal combustion engine. Still aren't, unless you are driven by motivating forces outside the key standard drivers like price, reliability, running costs, etc. Place the environment above all other key purchasing factors. Make yourself the motoring equivalent of a vegan. Have enough income to justify purchasing a vehicle on what are little more than religious grounds, pointing your BYD towards Shanghai every morning to start it. Then discover, lo and behold, there are only so many other owners in your privileged position, and the car won't tow diddly. Resale is on par with a VHS from 1980. Then wake up that no amount of rah-rah or devotion will address the market death spiral, that your EV is a liability, the market for EVs are collapsing, and I'm aware that last statement, the market for EVs is collapsing, will enrage teeth-gnashing greenies and trendies with more money than sense. Still, they have my full permission to join in with the more rational viewer answering this last question. No prizes, by the way. That figure on your screen was a number of cars sold in New Zealand in January 2024, per the AA, thanks to them. Of the 8,000 and something, how many of those were EVs? No clock this time either. Hums to self.
And 295.
That figure is frightening. Demand has plummeted, can't be plugged, pun intended, or plastered over anymore by government fleet purchases, subsidies, which we know from earlier rely on the vagaries of the government of the day. Look what just happened to the German market when subsidies were lowered there recently. Carnage. Read the headlines from overseas. And this is a global phenomenon occurring in mature markets. Demand is falling, and locally, fluffy press pieces about saving the planet are impervious to the realities of lower and middle income New Zealanders. They want cheap, reliable motoring, as do other motorists around the planet. In the medium to long term, the market always rules. Supply versus demand. Car companies are businesses after all, with shareholders who don't care what's making them return on investment, a Hummer or a Pyrus. How long until shareholders say,
hang on a minute here, this side of the company isn't profitable?
Overall, electric vehicles remain steadfastly an unprofitable side of the global car industry. I guess at least Toyota can go back to making more Corollas, scale back production on the loss-making side of their company. Ford can fall back on Rangers, etc. What will happen to Tesla and BYD? We already know that answer from the past. And just remember, the future is electric. And that photo was taken in 1928. Bye for now.